today I decided, because it is the Christmas season, that I would make an effort to talk to us metaphysically about Christmas. Years ago, when I was just getting on my journey for the metaphysical studies, well, let me start off by saying the Christmas story had always fascinated me. I just couldn't imagine parents going into a stable and having a baby, and all this stuff. It troubled me, quite frankly. And then when I got on the metaphysical path and I realized that there were a lot of these things were symbols, I felt better about life and about the story. So today I intend to share some of that with you. We all know that we celebrate Christmas on December the 25th, but we also know that that is not the day Jesus the Christ was born. The Bible gives us no date. It does give us some hints. Probably happened in the spring or in the fall, but it wasn't on December the 25th. The way that came about was in 336, Constantine, the first Christian emperor, decided that was going to be the day. And then Pope Julius I in 337 declared that was the day and made it officially the day that we would celebrate Jesus Christ's birth. So I thought that was kind of neat that we actually had a date set. The Bible is full of wonderful metaphysical symbols, but it's also intentionally done that way so that these symbols can be passed down through the ages. Because if the Bible were written metaphysically, first of all, a lot of people just wouldn't want to accept it, or they probably wouldn't believe it. And so it's been watered down, and that's okay, because things watered down continue to run down. They just keep trickling. When we talk about metaphysical symbols, we have to look at it at esoteric terms. Now, for those of you who do not know what esoteric means, it means that you learn by symbols. It's not so much as literal meanings as it is by symbols. And you have to be rather advanced in your spiritual growth to even understand them. If you're here today, that means you're on your path for spiritual growth. So I hope you get it. We need to be on a personal level of our inner spiritual development to access and understand them. In other words, to get to the hidden meanings, you have to do your actual work in self-realization. Metaphysically speaking, the birth of Jesus is the birth of the Christ consciousness that is born within every human. The incredible manifestation of the spiritual within. I'm now going to share some story, a couple of things. And Tim, will you put the first one up, please? Okay, this is the nativity scene, and this is what you're going to be looking at the majority of the time because it really encompasses almost everything that I'm going to discuss. So many things. I mean, I could have gone on for hours with this because you can go back to John the Baptist and talk about that, but we're just going to be talking about Christmas today, the Christmas date. First, it is interesting to note that Matthew is the only one of the four Gospels to mention the wise men, and Luke is the only Gospel that mentions the birth story. That's in Luke, we get the shepherds also. So let's talk a minute about the Immaculate Conception. Luke 1:31 reads, that an angel came to Mary and said, "For behold, you will conceive and give birth to a son, and you will call him Jesus." Luke 1:35 reads, "The Holy Spirit will come, and the power of the highest will rest upon you. Therefore, the one who is to be born of you is holy, and he will be called the Son of God." Metaphysically, we know thoughts are controlled by the mind through its power to say yes and no. And to hold a thought is to affirm or to deny a certain proposition, both mentally and audibly. Mary, the soul, was very devout, and she was expectant. And so she believed that in this so-called miraculous delivery or birth, that it was a possibility. She believed it. She trusted. So she was overshadowed by that high idea, and it formed in her mind the seed of conception. And this quickened into a cell, and in due season there were aggregations of this cell that were strong enough to take activity. And this is what is called the birth of Jesus the Christ. Metaphysically, Mary represents a pure state of mind. A pure state of mind ponders spiritual things and believes in the revelations from angels and messages from God. Angels are called the messengers of God, but she believed what the angel told her. Mary also means the soul or the higher self. And she was highly receptive and intuitive, and she was ready for the truth. Mary is significant, and there are books and books about Mary. But I think of Mary as being this teenager, this humble, devout, loving teenager that pondered things in her heart, as it's mentioned in the Bible many times. So when the angel came, she believed, and it was so. How many of us believe, and it is so? The virgin birth is another story. It represents the undefiled and purified stillness of the mind in each of us when it gives birth to the Christ consciousness. We have to be ready to receive. The Christ can be born in us only if we develop that virgin state of mind, the one-point consciousness where we recognize God only. And we are ready to say, as Mary did, "Behold, the handmaid of the Lord, be it unto me according to thy word." Then we have Joseph. Now, Joseph was in a predicament. Here he was engaged to this woman, and he finds out she's pregnant. And he knows he's not the father of this child. And he's a very pious man. And so the Bible tells us that he thought secretly that he would divorce Mary. Even when you're engaged, when you're in a line of a family, if you're engaged, you're still part of that line. So technically he was going to just discard her. But in Matthew 1:19, this is where it was talking about Joseph was thinking about divorcing her. But in 1:20, Joseph was told by an angel, "Do not be afraid to take your wife Mary, because he that is to be born of her is of the Holy Spirit." Metaphysically, this refers to the fact that in the first stages of the birth of the Christ consciousness in us, we do not understand the process and sometimes are moved to be away from it. So you can see how Joseph, he did not understand, and so it was a lot easier for him to discard her. But metaphysically, he began to understand, and she became his wife. Metaphysically, Joseph also represents our dutiful and trusting intellect, which is characterized by superior wisdom and understanding. The intellect cannot give birth to divine ideas. It can only protect them and nurture them. Joseph represents the illumined, concrete mind in the Christmas story of the lower self. So you had Mary, the higher self, and the lower self. And when the wisdom and when you have the concrete, the lower and the higher self come together, you get the Christ consciousness. Now we have the angel, and the angel's not depicted in this, but the angel comes through in so many of the stories about the birth of Jesus. And again, I said a minute ago that angels are messengers, and they are. They communicate between the higher energies and low energies, or they communicate between God and man. They're like a superhighway connecting information from the higher realms to the lower realms, and they carry concepts, thoughts, and ideas to be dispersed. Isn't that great to think? Has anyone in here ever seen an angel? There you go. Has anyone ever felt the presence of an angel? Has anyone ever believed and known that they received a message from the angels? They're alive and well in this day as they were in Mary and Joseph's day. It's listening to the angels and their messages that is so important. I love the song about the inn because we're going to talk about the inn. The inn is actually quite interesting. In the ancient Middle East, where Jesus was born, according to the gospel, the local inn was the place to be. It's where travelers met, spend the night. It's where food was served. It's where people traded, bartered. They did their business. It was a lively, active, wild place. And so here Mary and Joseph going to the inn to see if they can have their son born there. And God didn't really want to be born in all that chaos. That would not be the quote unquote ideal situation. But can you imagine those parents going and saying, no vacancy. You cannot be here. But we have a stable out back for you. So Luke 2:7 tells us that she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger because there was no room for them in the inn. Yet it is precisely because there was no room in the inn and the bustle of commerce and business that God chose not to be born in the inn. So let's fast forward to now and consider our world of the rush and the hustle and bustle that goes on all the time. We're shopping, we're going to parties, we're having people over, which is great. It's wonderful. And it's what a lot of the season is about. But as alluring as the hustle and bustle of the world is and the business, it is not the place for God to be born in order to bring about true spiritual change in this world. God needed a place where his presence would be welcomed, even if only in the smallest way. So no room at the inn metaphysically explains how the mind is constantly active in filling our consciousness with lower thoughts. We are too busy to go into meditation and think about spiritual things. The inn nearby or outside the stable is the outside world for all of us, with its cross currents, its confusions, and the normal worldly life. So we can be thankful that there was no room at the inn. Because the manger, metaphysically, represents the basic human emotions and the unaware human instincts in which new life is manifested. So this baby was placed into a manger. The manger itself is a source of nourishment, a source of life, because that's where animals fed. So what an appropriate place for the baby to be laid in the manger. Now we can also imagine the manger, Mary and Joseph looking at that manger thinking, what are we going to do? Because this has had food in it, it's messy, and I'm sure they made that as comfortable a bed as possible. But that's not the relevant part about the manger. It's where the baby Jesus was to be born, because that's where the Christ, the Son of God, had to be born in a quiet, comfortable place. Have you ever thought about a stable? Have you ever been into a barn where animals are? It's a great place to go. Yes, there are smells of animals, but they're just animals and they're wonderful. But the barn or a stable is a warm, quiet place where things are calm. Animals have gone there to rest. And metaphysically, the stable represents the human body and the quiet place. It turns out that the stable was one of the least prestigious locations. It, again, was where the animals were housed. And we talked about the bed. In modern terms, however, being born in a stable and laid in a manger would be like being born in a hospital parking lot and laid down in the back seat of a car because the maternity ward was full and there were no beds available in the hospital. And yet, in a stable, there was room for the Christ consciousness to be born. The Star of Bethlehem, we can't really see the star, but we see the shine from the star. It symbolizes our inner convictions, which metaphysically are the divine assurance that come to one when we are fully satisfied of the worth of truth with a capital T. Metaphysically, truth is that which is, has been, and will be eternally is. The truth of God is reality. As man's consciousness or awareness expands, he touches the everlasting truth. Now, what is the significance of Jesus being born in Bethlehem? Well, Bethlehem means the house of bread, or house of living, and it symbolizes the abiding place of substance. Now, we hear the word substance, we even heard it in one of our songs, but substance is the spiritual essence, the living energy out of which everything is made. Think about that. So Bethlehem was where everything was going to happen. It was the house of bread, the house of substance. The shepherds represent the walkers of the path who are also teachers. Their flock is the public. Shepherds also represent the humble, trustworthy thoughts that we have that watch over our good and obedient intentions. So when we have good intentions, it's like we're the shepherd taking care of that flock of intentions or thoughts. The animals. I love the story of the animals. But what they represent, they're part of our spirit, of our physical nature, our instincts, and our physical being. We are animals. But these animals don't know all the egos, all the trials and tribulations that we humans do. Animals just trust. They love. Animals respond to love. Animals give love. And all of you know I love animals. So I could go on and on about animals, but I won't. But animals are significant in any part of life, and I think especially at the manger scene. Now the wise men are not depicted here because the wise men didn't really come when Jesus was in Bethlehem. They came possibly 2 years later. But the wise men are a part of the story, and the wise men are very interesting. In Matthew 2, 1 through 12, that's when it's talked about the wise men. And while it is customary to talk about the 3 wise men, we do not know how many wise men there were. But it came about being 3 because of the 3 gifts, we think. The important teaching is that wise men seek the Christ. Applied to us, this means that when our God-given wisdom is spiritually illumined, we seek the Christ, not in far-off places, but within ourselves. And the gifts that were given, one was gold, which is a realization of the richness of spirit or divine ideas. Frankincense, a realization of the beauty of things, divine ideas. And myrrh, a realization of the eternity of the spirit, divine idea. The wise men represent the wisdom that is carried within the soul from the previous incarnations, and they represent the within, the man, our inner consciousness. Tim, you can go to the next one, please. And I found this picture of this precious baby. Because last but not least, we have Jesus, who was born as a baby. And he was born helpless. Because the Christ consciousness, when incarnated, is small. And it needs to grow to maturity. So when we begin our journeys into the metaphysical understanding of the Christ consciousness, that's how we start. We don't understand it. We are wondering. We are growing. But we have parents. We have David. We have Greg. We have all of you who help us grow with the Christ consciousness so that we can grow into the mature Christ consciousnesses that we are now. The infant Jesus represents love and intuition. Intuition gives a person the power to comprehend and apprehend truth directly, so he cannot be deceived. Love guides us to an intelligent use of our new power and our new wisdom. We must remember that from a spiritual perspective, nothing in the Bible is mere historical fact or fiction. If we think of the Bible as a spiritual book telling a spiritual story, then the real meaning is all about our spiritual life. In other words, the Bible's true meaning is about what happens in our hearts and in our minds and in our relationships with one another and with God. And if that is so, what does the gospel story of the birth of Jesus the Christ mean in the story of our lives? It's how God is born spiritually as a baby, and how our hearts and minds, busy like the inn where there is no room for God to be born, can be peaceful like the stable and the manger where there is room. Put simply, God is born within us whenever we feel God's presence in a new way, and our lives move to a higher, more spiritual level as a result. Looking back on our lives, many of us can probably pinpoint an exact time when we were aware of this Christ consciousness within us. I can raise my hand and know exactly when it happened. And it was a turning point when my goals changed, and yours probably did too. The turning point is represented in the Bible by the birth of Jesus the Christ. And just as there are larger and smaller cycles throughout our lives and in the days of nature and everything from larger and smaller cycles, every cycle begins long or short, and there's always, I think that's my phone. Hold on a minute, because if I don't stop it, it's going to just keep on going. So hold on. I bet it's my daughter texting me. Nothing like a little interruption here. Isn't that the truth? No, it was my son. But the Christ consciousness can be born in us, not just once in a lifetime, and not just when we celebrate Christmas, but it can happen every day, and actually every moment. Every time we feel God working in our lives, we are having a birth of that Christ consciousness. So let's think about these births. We've got the outer manger and the inner manger. The outer manger is hectic, busy, running to and fro, paying bills, working all the time, in our cars. Just, our days are crammed. So there's that busy in our lives. And there is no room for the Christ to be born in us. But we also have our inner mangers that we can find at any time just by going within and realizing that that spark of God is in every one of us. And I'm getting shivers, and shivers for me are truth. And shivers for me, I know I am getting a message that what I just said was true. So thank you. We know that it is necessary, absolutely necessary, to be involved in this busy world. That's how we live. However, we can take time and we can find time to stop and realize the inner manger that resides in our hearts. My hope is that if you are feeling emptiness and longing once the hectic days of preparation for Christmas are over, or even while it's going on, that you will find the time and the space to feed your soul with spiritual knowledge, and to find a simple place in your heart for God's Spirit to be born into your life in a new way. In Luke 2, 10 through 12, the angel said to them, "Do not be afraid, for I am bringing you good news of great joy for all the people. This very day in the city of David, a Savior, a baby, who is Christ the Lord, is born for you. This will be the sign for you. You will find the child wrapped in swaddling clothes and lying in a manger." Come and be open to the Christmas experience. Open your hearts to the Christ consciousness within each of us. And you can do this if you're just willing. And may you have the spirit of Christmas, which is peace, the gladness of Christmas, which is hope, and the heart of Christmas, which is love. And so it is. So I would like for everyone to get comfortable in their chairs. Take several deep breaths. And let's turn our minds to Christmas. When we were children, we were full of wonder at what Christmas meant. Often it meant giving and receiving gifts, having wonderful meals with families and friends, going to church, singing Christmas carols, sometimes enjoying snow depending on where you lived, watching Christmas specials on TV and listening to Christmas music. Sometimes, however, some of us may not have had these wonderful memories, and we feel as though we missed out on something in our childhood. Even if childhoods did not contain special happy memories, it is quite possible that every one of us still experienced a sense of wonder. Pause for a moment to see if you can remember having this wonder. So as you sit comfortably, open your hearts to happy memories, even if you have to imagine them. Think back to a happy Christmas of your life, or one that you would like to have had. Or better yet, simply feel and look for the wonder in your heart. Can you remember what waiting for Christmas was like? Was it hope, desire, excitement, dreams? Take a breath. Let it go. And remember and know that Christmas is not getting things, because Christmas is not things at all. Christmas is a wonder, and it is for wonder. Christmas is believing. Christmas is hoping. Christmas is dreaming. It is a holiday holy to humanity's dreams and hopes. Christmas is the birth of Jesus the Christ and the Christ consciousness within each of us. Many of us will remember when we became aware of the Christ consciousness within us and were aware that there was a change when we felt a spark of hope or belief that there was something more. What was that something more? Sit for a moment and remember that time or that place or both when you felt your first connection to Father, Mother, God, and feel the love of being a part of the One. Take that feeling and consciousness into your heart and feel gratefulness. Be grateful for the awareness and the new feeling of being a part of the all that is. And hold that thought or feeling or image for just a few moments. Now, as you come back to this time in this place, come back with the awareness that Jesus, the Christ, was born to introduce us to the Christ consciousness within each of us. Be thankful for his birth and be aware that Jesus' birth changed the world. We may not all think the same thoughts and we may not all share the same beliefs, but we can all be accepting of the fact that we are part of the One. We can look at Christmas and the Nativity with renewed knowledge and understanding and be thankful that the Bible was written in symbols that are now evident to us. We are changed and we have grown from the knowledge and information received today. We thank you, Father, Mother, God, for our many blessings at this Christmas season and always. And so it is.